Welcome everybody to another episode of Stu and the Nunn, episode 395. As you can see, we've got a full cast tonight. Troy has the night off, so we're gonna kind of hold the ground for him and take his place, hopefully, and give you guys some entertainment. We're gonna start it off with one of the hottest topics of the day right now, and that's fraud in the country. So there's all kinds of fraud going around. We've seen Nick Shirley has done several videos. He's got quite a million views on a lot of his videos about not only welfare fraud, but now he's in California looking at voter fraud. So has James O'Keefe, formerly of Veritas. My first question to you, Pat, is how rampant, with what you've seen from Nick and James and everything, how rampant do you think fraud really is?
I think it's so big you can't even find it all. That's how big I think it is. But what's got me crazy right now is the argument coming from the liberal side of this doesn't make any sense, man. It just makes them look guilty, dude. If there's even a little bit of fraud, why are you not willing to go after it? That's what doesn't make any sense to me. You know,
Right.
Be willing to be open minded and be on board with the investigation. But everything right now is just if Trump says it, I'm against it, and they're never going to get him on board. It's going to be a while before we can get a debate on something like this, dude. Trump's gonna have to be long gone before that happens.
Well, I mean, they fought Doe's tooth and nail, right? I mean, that was trying to go after fraud, and they fought anything. I'm not sure that was so much fighting the fraud as much as it was fighting anything that Trump put forward. So, I mean, you never know. So do you think, Tyler? Do you think the media downplays the amount of fraud that's out there? Or?
I think the media has their talking points. They're trying to just stick to whatever's going to keep them to get enough views to stay in play. And when people pull the string and say, hey, you're encroaching on my fraud and you're going to expose me, you're going to stop talking about it. And they're just they're just puppets for the puppeteers, really, in my mind.
Right.
And that's all that they're doing. And what sucks is I think we're seeing it in independent journalists, with Nick Shirley and James O'Keefe, and they show it. But the sad part is where's the media showing what happens to those people that were found guilty of this fraud?
Sure.
There's no media coverage whatsoever of what's actually happening to them.
Yeah, they don't seem to be very interested. And I was watching an interview with James Fetterman, and he was talking about the Democrat Party in particular, and they were asking him, who's running the Democratic Party, and his answer was Trump derangement syndrome is running the Democratic Party. That's who the leader of the Democratic Party is right now. Is TDS. So Carlos, what do you think we can do to fix the amount of fraud that's going on? I mean, you're more on the business side, and so what do you think we can do?
So it's validation. I mean, when you're looking at it from a perspective of doing business with the government, you have to validate everything that you've done. You have to verify that you're complying with the requirements, whether it's FAR or DFAR regulations or whatever contract that you have or deliverables that you're doing. You have to prove it. Why is it that we can't have proof of citizenship or proof that you're legal and able to vote? It's just simple validation. And so it doesn't make sense to me that you have to have all of these items in place to be able to do business with the government, but you have a right to vote, but you can't go and prove, because there are limitations to the right to vote. And so if you're going to have that, well, then you just have to show it.
So do you think that the lack of validation is intentional with writing the laws, or do you think it's just they missed it when they wrote some of these laws? Do you think the government is and the politicians are intentionally doing this so that they can take advantage of it as well?
I think everybody's so fast to get a win that you can't write something fast enough to get it out the door and go, I won. And then next thing you know, they turn around and go, oh shit, I did not see that. We missed all of that. And so now, but then now you got to tuck your tail, because now you have to backtrack and go, well, we didn't mean to do that. And of course, nobody wants to do that, especially a politician. So.
Right. So you mentioned validation, and one of the biggest things on, that has overwhelming support right now across the board, which is very rare, right? And so it's very rare that you have both the left and the right a majority agree to something, and that's the SAVE Act. And we can't seem to get that across the table. So, Sean, do you think that SAVE Act, do you think it's going to help solve some of these problems? Do you think it's going to cause other problems? Have you been able to dive into it very deep?
So I support the principle of the SAVE Act, but does it really help or hurt the issues, right? So I support the principle, citizenship verification matters, right? So think about it. We already verify identity every day. To work, you have to verify your identity. You have to show 2 forms of ID for your I-9. When you go into banking, you have to show an ID. You have to show an ID to almost live everyday life. So I don't buy it that you don't need an ID to vote, don't need an ID for this and that. So I believe the key to execution is it needs to be accessible, consistent, and fair, right? That's my take on the SAVE Act. I think it will help and solve the issues. That's my take.
So I was watching Joey Jones, former Marine, double amputee on Fox, and he was talking about IDs. And he said, he goes, all it takes is a little bit of effort. And if you as a U.S. citizen are unwilling to put forth enough effort to go get the documentation needed to vote, I don't want you to vote. If you're unwilling to put forth that little bit of effort for your country, we're not asking you to go to war. We're not asking you to sacrifice your life. We're asking you to go get some documentation and prove you're a citizen.
Correct.
That's all we're asking for you. We're not asking the world. So if you can't even do that bare minimum, I don't want you to vote.
Well, anyone that works, anyone that drives has an ID. So explain to me the logic behind you have to show an ID to have a job. You have to have an ID to drive. You have to have an ID to use the banking system, but you don't have to have an ID to exercise the most basic function in our society.
Yeah, where the problem came in was, so a lot of us have the real ID, right? I have one of those. I had to show my birth certificate when I got it. But there's a lot of states started issuing those to people that were not approved for voting, right? If you're here on a green card, you can't vote. If you're here under, a lot of the Haitians and work visas and stuff like that. But the states were issuing those ID cards. Had the states not done that, had the real ID been the one ID that you could show and prove your citizenship, this would not even be an issue. States, I think, shot their own selves in the foot, causing this issue and causing this to
let me make one point too that that I noticed in the last couple of months when they talk about IDs, they pivoted away from the African American households can't vote, they can't go out and get these IDs, to now women can't vote. So if women can't vote or they can't get off their butt and get an ID, how you want to be a woman president to be in charge of this country? She can't even get an ID, is what you're telling me. They're that incompetent. So it's just backhanded freaking sexism. It's backhanded racism that they're too stupid. They're not able to figure out where the DMV is. That's the kind of crap that drives me crazy with this topic. Is that there's just backhanded freaking disrespect to these individuals they're talking about.
It's insulting.
It's terrible, and there's no one saying anything about it.
Right. Nothing on this topic, Carlos.
An ID to get free shit. So what government subsidies and those types of things, you're going to have to show an ID for there, so people will go off and get one, and then they just won't go and vote. But it's the others that will.
I think in the last election, Trump got a large group of black males that voted Trump. So now they're losing a black vote. And so they have liberal white women and illegal aliens. Well, that's what they're going for. They're saying women aren't able to go vote because of this act, and then they're supporting this illegal immigration. That they've just left out the fact that black males have transferred over to the conservative side because they're tired of the bullshit.
Well, that you put it on two things, and that's the racism and the misogyny. Just it's blatant. It's absolutely blatant. And how anybody who's in those two categories doesn't see that, doesn't look at that and go, what do you mean? I'm you think I'm too stupid to be able to get an ID? You think I'm too stupid to get my own birth certificate?
Wasn't that Holcomb from New York, right? The governor said that black people are not smart enough to figure out what the internet is, dude.
Yeah.
Said that live on camera.
He literally did say that.
Are you kidding me right now?
Yeah. Oh, all right. Well, let's shift topics and talk about Sean, one of your favorite topics, and that is Anthropic, and that's AI. Do you think companies should prioritize safety and capability over innovation?
Safety and capability over innovation. So I believe they go hand in hand. So safety and capability. So with innovation comes with capability comes innovation, and with innovation comes capability. So in terms of safety, are we talking the AI doesn't tell you to go kill yourself, or doesn't teach you how to make a bomb? What are we talking in terms of safety? Define that for me.
Well, so one of the biggest things with Anthropic right now was, and the current administration was, Anthropic wouldn't agree to spying on Americans, right? And so that can lead into neutrality. I mean, and it leads into a little bit of the safety and the security aspect of it, because remember a couple of years ago when Apple absolutely refused to unlock their phones for the government. And then one of the safe companies, one of the gun safe companies, turned around and gave the government the backdoor code to a safe so that they could get into it. And they got raked across the coals by, especially in the gun community, for doing so. So do you think that, what should AI companies, should they partner with the government in this? I mean, how do they walk that line?
So I think the question that you're asking is around neutrality, right? Around, should they be neutral? And in my opinion, neutrality is hard. It's very difficult for even the AI to be neutral. And in my opinion, the best approach is you have to ground everything as much as possible in verifiable real-time facts. When the facts are unclear, then you have to provide multiple credible perspectives. That's how you should train your large language models. On the data that you train them on should be multiple credible sources or verifiable facts, or have it go out and search for verifiable real-time facts. They should prioritize transparency over hidden bias. Now, does that happen? So far, it's been hit or miss, not only with Anthropic, but with OpenAI, with a number of the models out there. If the facts are clear, in my opinion, if the facts are clear, show them. If not, show the range.
So data is only as good as the source, right?
Right.
And so if you're looking at something like Wikipedia, which we know is flawed, right? Because that's the community updating it, that could be a problem. So Carlos, to you, who should control that? Who should be the gatekeeper? Do you think it's a mix of the international community? Because it's like ChatGPT, OpenAI, there's a couple of others out there. Do you think that the government should set regulations and kind of control that? Do you think the individual companies should control it? Do you think there should be an international thing, kind of like the internet is now? What's the best way to kind of put some controls around this?
It's gonna have to be controlled, because you can't have a breach that opens up a back door to our military or our resources of what we're doing, whether it be the information or actually the source code that we're actually deploying with certain elements of products that the military is either building or deploying. So it's going to have to be a mix. But at the end of the day, you're going to have companies that don't give a shit what the government does, because they just want the money. Right. So they're going to give the government access because everybody they're going to want to make the revenue. So there are going to be companies out there that just decide, you know what, we want to be in partnership with the government, and we're going to do this. We're going to allow the government to have a platform and a say in it because it's going to provide a good return. It's these huge venture capitalist companies that have so much money coming in that they're going, no, hold up, man. Now you're going to restrict us, and it's going to limit the amount of billions of dollars we can make on an average, time frame. So I think that's where the biggest argument is right there. But you cannot have another sovereign nation having a say-so or access to something, because you never know when they're going to decide, well, we want to see it too, or we want to use it for our benefit.
Well, and you already see this, right? So we have like Sean had mentioned, you have your open language models, right? And the government creates their own, and companies do. I mean, the company you work for has your own, right? And so you get to control that data, and you can put some controls around it. But I think as things like Chat GPT get even bigger, and Grok, well, I always forget about Grok, but as these things get bigger and bigger and bigger and are accessed globally for those type of public things, how do we put some controls around that? Do we expect the US government to put their controls, and then UK to put their controls, and then, kind of like we do a little bit with the internet, but we also have a larger group at the top managing standards for the internet, right? So how do we structure this entire thing? We can always do our private models, right? And we can control that from a government standpoint, from a company standpoint, from an individual standpoint. I can deploy a language model on my home server, but how do we do it for the public to ensure that what's going out there is accurate, right? So we just got done with this long term of misinformation and fake news and all of this. How do we put controls around this to make sure what's being fed into these behemoths that are coming up is controlled and accurate?
Well, that's one of the things that they're looking at. And, you have a lot of these large companies, because let's just say NVIDIA is pushing Clyde for Anthropic. That's their big, huge bread and butter piece. And NVIDIA is global. I mean, they're pushing sovereign AI all across the world, the globe right now, and, in these different aspects. So it's going to have to be with the companies that are owning and managing this technology, just like they're doing with the GPUs and the CPUs. You can put export regulations into weighted teraflop calculations and advanced computing, manufacturing, and all of these different areas and levels and stuff. But how do you control it when you have people like Supermicro who are going off and changing the labels on stuff and getting away with, sending this stuff out? So there is a need for control, but where the element is because it's larger than the internet per se in that aspect. So how do you limit the incorrect data? But the control aspect, you're going to have to depend on the companies that are pushing it out.
So
isn't that how we ended up with Terminator? I mean, it becomes self-aware and starts managing itself. I mean, is that where we're headed?
Can I respond to that, Rob?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So to Carlos's point, so my concern, and I agree with what Carlos said, my concern is when these models, because they're advancing every day, we see this, especially in our profession, right? We see this every day, especially when Gen AI comes out, because that's going to happen. 3 to 5 years. That's going to happen when they get big enough that now they are dictating to the owner. They are dictating to the government. They're dictating to the entity. Then who has control? So we talk about control, but I believe there's going to come a moment, oh shit, the Matrix moment, perhaps, that do we have control? Who has control, right? I worry about that. That's a legit concern.
right?
Especially when you consider Silicon Valley and the way and what that area is run by. These are the individuals that are going to have this kind of power to say yes or no, to veto,
Right.
to do all these things. And then
Right.
the flip side of that coin is now you have China on the backside of that trying to steal this information. Are they going to sell us out to China for money like they do it with Nike right now? You know, I mean, Apple. All this stuff is sold overseas. So how does this not become something they just sell to China, Russia?
Well, ChatGPT is slowly overtaking Google, right? In searching, right? Nobody goes to, hardly people go to Google anymore and search for something. They go to ChatGPT and they're looking for answers, right? Well, it's very easy, being in the IT world, for me to drop in the poison pill and be able to, change that response, and give them fake information. Whether somebody's running there incorrectly, right? Running there looking for medical information, looking for something to, how to do CPR or who knows whatever. And you drop in one or two things into the pond that have completely ruined it and start corrupting the data, right? I mean, it's very dangerous. So, but Pat, how do you think this is going to affect the military? I mean, AI going forward in the military and the battlefield. I mean, especially if we start putting restrictions on us. But remember, the enemy has a vote, right? So how does that affect our?
I mean, in my opinion, man, they're going to use it like they use every other kind of tool when it comes to technology. Dude. They're going to use it to find a way to kill or threaten to kill. You know, what I mean, that's where it's going to boil down to intel and how do you kill without using the actual people in place for that. You know what I mean? I think they're going to use it for good, but I also think there's opportunity there for them to use it in ways that we're never going to know about. You know what I mean? So you have the two sides of that coin. The civilians have the power, and then you give the government the power. Both of these individuals, groups, kind of scare me in a lot of ways when you think about who's involved in these, because we're not talking about you and I or other veterans do. We're talking about bureaucrats that have 4 stars on their collar. You know, they're not us. They're not thinking like us. And what they could use this kind of stuff for that we'll never even have a clue what they're using it for. And then China on the flip side, like I said before, that's what scares the hell out of me. They broke into the White House, if I'm not mistaken, right? And took information, hacked into their shit. China is going to steal it no matter how you look at it. If the government has it or civilian has it, they're going to steal it.
If it's connected, you can get to it.
100%.
Somebody can get to it. So what do you think, Tyler? I mean, do we get to a symbiotic point, or do we end up with like Terminator and it's going to kill us all? What do you think?
I think AI turning completely sentient is so far away from anywhere where we're at. That is one of the last things I'm concerned about. Simply because I work with it and I build systems for businesses. And so I can tell you with where it's at right now, it is so far from becoming sentient to the general public or something like that, where it's going to turn into Terminator. So that's like the least of my worries. I do think Anthropic, which is the main LLM that I use and what I provide to my clients, and we do that for a multitude of reasons, but one of them being that is the fact that they kind of show that their values and their morals are more important than money. They walked away from billions of dollars for government guaranteed money from a government contract to say that we don't agree, our morals don't agree with the mass surveillance and the completely autonomous weapon systems right now, because the LMs are not capable of that, and they don't trust their own LMs to do that. That should tell you a lot as to why they walked out of that deal. They don't trust their own model to handle completely autonomous weapon systems right now, and they're telling you that it's not capable of doing that. And then the very next day, OpenAI signed the contract that the government was trying to get Anthropic to sign. So that tells you right then and there who's willing to sell your data and who's willing to sell you out and who's not. And so for me, that was a very, very important piece.
That's a great segue.
Government's going to get it. Government's going to get it if they want it. If you want them to or not, they're going to get it. They steal it from museums, just like China would. Yeah.
So that's a good segue into the next topic. And what we've seen in Iran is a completely different battlefield. We're seeing drones that they're programming to they're set and forget, right? The U.S. has always operated with our drones where they're remote manned, right? The drones we're seeing in Iran as of these conflicts, they're setting the coordinates, releasing it, and they're done, right? They know the drone's not coming back. They don't expect the drone to come back. And so there's a little bit of, this AI-ish type going on into this. So what's our strategy and everything for Iran going to be in this new battlefield, Tyler? What are we going to do there? I mean, what's our long term?
Costs, right? We're gonna have to figure out different countermeasures. The cost of creating one of those drones is ridiculously cheap, right? You set it, forget it, and walk away, right? Our drones, we are vested in them coming back to us and maintaining them and keeping up. So the cost of production is extremely high.
Right.
So we're gonna have to start adapting and start figuring out different capabilities and countermeasures, right? And I think AI is going to help with that, right? We can run simulations. There's a really cool tool put out recently called auto research, right? It's things like that where you can run hundreds of simulations and improving the AI itself and what it's doing. You literally have AI agents improving AI agents and helping you improve those. So things like that, when these things come out, when that capability is available and we use it for the good portion, right? How do we defend innocent civilians? Because those drones generally don't always hit their target. There's going to be casualties that are collateral damage in this. So how do we create countermeasures that make those drones basically no longer a threat or as little as a threat as possible?
Right. So Los, how do sanctions and everything help with that? What kind of parameters can we put around Iran to help counter some of this?
Well, they were talking about, lifting some sanctions because of the whole oil aspect. We're over 110 a barrel right now. That doesn't solve the problem. That puts a Band-Aid, but also ends up putting more money back in to Iran to pay for these cheap drones and those types of things. Not only that, but what everybody's doing is, we heard with Russia, they were targeting appliances that had the chips that they needed to be able to build certain aspects and those types of things. So there's always these strategic ways around these regulations. And, we brought up Supermicro, or I did earlier. Again, there's another way around getting around these regulations. What I think is happening is now a point where businesses are starting to get penalized where they've never been penalized before, and it's causing more of a ruckus within the commercial industry that they're going to now, because the big players are starting to get the the hit. Your Cadences, your AMD, your Applied Materials, all these other big companies, as was it Seagate and those types. So I think that now that they're getting targeted, there's going to be more of an effort. But the problem is that there's not enough monitoring that the government's able to do, and they can't even get licenses for the people that are trying to do the right thing. And so from that standpoint, there's going to be either a people are going to just shy away from doing business in certain regions, or they're just going to go and do it and go, whatever happens, happens.
Is there anything in the toolbox that could stop the flow from China into there? Because we know China's supporting Iran. We know Russia's supporting Iran. Do we have anything from a United States standpoint to stop that flow of technology and weapons?
The number one thing that the administrations have done over the last, let's say, 5 or 6 years is stopping the advancement of building the technology, the advanced computing, the capability to build that. And so limiting that infrastructure so that they can't build on the technology. But the way that you build on that technology is having the equipment, those pieces that are needed to build those chips, to build that technology. So if you minimize that piece of it, and depending on the Netherlands, companies over there and Japan, which are the big tool manufacturers for that technology, when you can limit that, and now everybody is jumping on board going, if you sell that to China, where they can start building and advancing this technology, we're not doing business with you, period.
Right.
And so you're seeing that a lot more with businesses, especially in the technology world, where they're becoming very careful and they're following their supply chain because they're making sure that nothing that they're doing is going to the advancement of that technology in China.
Right. Right. So one of the things that Trump did to limit that, not really the technology, but limit capabilities was, well, after he withdrew us from the agreement with Iran, he struck their nuclear facilities. Right. So what do you think, Pat? Do you think withdrawing from that agreement, do you think Iran was even holding true to it to begin with? I mean, they've got a history of lying to us. So and just to keep kicking the can down the road.
I mean, to answer that question, I'll ask you a question. Do you think Russia would lie to us? Do you think China would lie to us? Do you think North Korea would lie to us?
Yeah.
Who do you think Iran's in cahoots with? So, of course, they're going to lie to us. They're never going to let us in there and see what they actually have. Will we let anybody in the United States to see what we actually have? I mean, no country's letting someone in to actually show their hand and say, this is exactly what I have, especially knowing the United States would just bomb the shit out of it, dude.
Yeah. Well, I think part of that agreement did have inspectors, right? They had to be inspected. But I mean, it's just like an audit, right? You lift up the rug and you sweep the stuff underneath it when the auditors come in. And then when they come out, you pull everything out from under the rug.
Well, just with an audit, you know what they're going to be looking at. So
to go back to something earlier where you talked about sanctions, man, I think about fentanyl. Like they busted China with all these shops they were building, making fentanyl, shipping it to the southern border, and then bringing it up. And then they said, well, we didn't ship it to you. And, this country below us did. Right. So then they said, well, you can't make fentanyl anymore. So they shut them down. So what they did was they sent the components to make fentanyl to these countries. Instead, they broke it down and said, we're not sending fentanyl, but we're sending everything we can to make fentanyl. So if you tell these guys that for drones that they can't sell drones to certain people or take the chip, they're going to send the things that can make the chip, that can make the drone to these other places to get around it. Because on paper, it's legal. We didn't send them a drone. We sent them all the components to make one. We don't know what they're going to do with it. They just asked us for these components. So,
well, they're not shipping it with the Iran Navy, that's for sure, because they're on the bottom of the ocean.
It's an extremely slow boat nowadays.
So, what do you think, Sean, is the risk to direct conflict? Do you think we're going in there? Do you think we're going to have boots on the ground? Do you think we have boots on the ground?
So I'm of the opinion, and I'm sure Tyler probably agrees, given that we both circled around the same community, but I believe special forces is probably already on the ground, and we won't know about that until a while from now. But I can tell you that by the definition of the term, we are already in active conflict conditions, right? I mean, Iran's attacked ships. They've effectively disrupted the Strait of Hormuz. We've destroyed their air force, destroyed their navy. There's effectively a no-fly zone across their country. That strait carries 20% of the world's oil. There's massive stakes. So here's what I think we need to do to tie a boat on this, because what we want to avoid is a large scale ground war, a long-term occupation. And all of us have seen that before. We've seen how that plays out. And I am vehemently against a occupation. I've seen it. I've been there, and I'm not for it. So I think what we need to do is we need to finish degrading Iran's military capability. I'm for the if need be, the Stone Age option. And then I'm not for regime change. No, just degrade their military to the point to where it's slingshots, contain what remains of the regime, and then secure the Strait of Hormuz. Because once the regime is contained, and I do believe you can do that once you've degraded their capability, their military capability, to the point where there is no capability, containing the regime becomes a lot easier. Then you're able to secure the strait, secure the global oil flow, or make that flow happen again. That's, to me, that is a full disarmament without the escalation of a large scale ground war, because no one, especially in our country has the appetite for a large scale ground war.
If I were in charge of this, and you mentioned boots on the ground, if I were in charge, put Rob in charge, I would have Israel's Mossad be the ground forces. As good as our military is, as good as our special forces,
I think they're already there.
Force,
Yeah.
I know they are. I know they are. We saw it with the pager incident, and we saw it with a couple other things. But I would make it a point, if I were Trump, to say, "Hey, Bibi, we're not putting our guys in there. You go put your guys in there. One, your guys are already from the region, so you're going to blend in a lot better, right? Two, I'm not putting my guys in the way, right? We just spent 20 years doing that. We don't need to do that again, right? So you put your guys in there. We'll support you from the air. We'll support you from the sea. We'll support you, whatever else you need. But you guys are going to be the ground forces.
Exactly. Yep. I'm for that. I mean, really, you have to break their capability, contain what's left, and keep the oil flowing without getting dragged into another forever war.
Isn't this what caused the regime change in Iran to begin with in 1979? Wasn't it over oil? The leader they had in Iran wanted to make oil like a global commodity, and somehow, next thing you know, that guy's gone, and this regime is there. I think that's what this started from.
Usually, when they want to go away from the petrodollar, that's usually what happens.
But the leader of Iran that was removed or replaced, that guy wanted to make oil a global commodity, and oil is money, and all this shit. Everything you look at that's going on in this world today, everything has to do with money. So we kind of created our own shitstorm, if you ask me. But aren't they sending 2,500 Marines already over there? 86th Airborne's on their way over there as well.
82nd Airborne.
Yeah, 82nd.
Yeah.
I don't know shit about the Army, but yeah, they're supposed to be sending some of these guys over there already. They're already en route.
Well, you had mentioned something, Pat, about shipping this stuff to other countries, and so one of the things outside of Iran that Trump has actually said was, "Hey, Cuba, I'll get to you when I'm done with Iran." Right, and so Cuba being so close to us, what do you think? What do you think, Sean? Should we make them part, kind of like Puerto Rico? Should we make them part of the U.S.? Should we make them not necessarily a state, but a territory of the U.S.? So when we're done with Iran, of course.
So I have kind of a different take on this. I don't want to, if it's me, I don't want to assume Cuba as a territory. I don't want to, definitely not make the state assume it as a territory. I would like to limit them as an influence and a potential threat. I do think cutting off their influence, because they were a big influence in South America in terms of spreading communism, far left socialism, even narco-terrorism, right? I mean, they helped spread that through South America. So I do think it's good to cripple them the way that we've crippled them, and it's paying dividends because their regime is on the verge of collapsing. But I do not think that we are in a position right now. We have more at home that we need to be focused on, and now that we've engaged in global politics with Iran and the global oil flow, just taking on another issue with Cuba as popular and legacy minded. This is, my little feather in my cap that Trump wants. And I understand it, but it's just, I don't really see the value added. I would rather, if he wants a feather in his cap, purchase Greenland. You know what I mean?
He tried that, and they put up a not for sale sign on it.
Right.
We talked about it on the podcast before about how Greenland, how the Netherlands sent in some people with bombs because they were going to bomb the runway so the U.S. could land there. Do they not know we have C-130s with skis? Do they not know that? Do they not know that we have an entire infantry division in Alaska that jumps into 30 feet snow with skis on their back that's capable of doing that? Do they not know that?
No, that's the biggest problem is they can't defend the region.
Right.
Yeah.
They use sled dogs, I think.
Yeah.
They had like sled dogs and soldiers doing dance montages on video. Did
So-
you guys see that?
Even though it's been tried before, I mean, it's successful with Puerto Rico to a point, right? I mean, we let them do their kind of own elections, but they have representation in our government. Do you think, Carlos, if we normalized relations and economics with Cuba, that it would help drive out communism, or do you think it's just too ingrained in what they've got?
The regime has to change, and it's crippling, and so they're hurting. But you have to open up diplomatic ties. You have to lift sanctions, because if you don't allow an economy to flourish there and actually build where they're now being successful and flourishing, all you're doing is opening a area that is suffering again, and then another regime who is more like the last is going to come in and just take over, and they're going to give a little bit of money and do whatever, but they're going to go out to the biggest bidders, which are usually Russia, China, and so forth. So I think that if you go in, you open those sanctions, you open up diplomacy on that piece of it, you open up commercial aspects. I mean, Trump, I'm sure, would love to put a resort on all sides of Cuba right now. So, I mean, turn it into a tourist attraction and let them make some money, man.
Well, the first thing that would go in there would be a naval base, right, Pat? And so a naval base would go in there, and then they deploy a bunch of Marines there, and then you would end up with a whole bunch of children that are U.S. and Cuban, right? You would end up with a whole bunch of
We fuck everything, man. That's what
Yeah.
we drink, we fuck, and we fight, dude. That's pretty much it. Yeah, there would be you'd have a bunch of Cuban moms back here that were made legal citizens in the United States. I look at Cuba as like the Venezuelan project, man. Just scoop in and take that guy by helicopter, get him the fuck out. It's right on. I mean, so close to the United States. It's not like Iran, who has the same allies. They're right there, and that was the Cuban Missile Crisis. The reason we said fuck no, it's too damn close to American territory. So sanctions, yes, sanction the fuck out of them to the point where they're at now, where they have no power over there right now. Get them to the point where they have to at least agree to something and use diplomatic measures, but also shake that big stick, and let them know that, hey, we can scoop in a helicopter in the middle of the night and take you out in a Nike jumper and bring you home.
The sanctions are working so well that Greta Thunberg is asking for oil to be released to him. I mean, that's how well the sanctions are. I mean, she literally said that. She's like, you need to give him some oil. I'm like, wait a minute. You were just screaming about us drilling, and now all of a sudden you want us to give Cuba oil? Come on,
I think there's a pattern here. When you look at Venezuela, you look at Iran, you look at Cuba. This is all aimed at China. They're trying. Trump his big plan is to limit China as much as possible by shutting down all these avenues of oil and revenue. So I think Cuba is going to fall in line. I think they probably don't really have to do shit. He's seen what's going on in Iran. He saw what happened in Venezuela. I don't think Cuba's really looking at that every night as a comfortable night to sleep. I think they're terrified. They're constantly looking up to make sure a helicopter or a bomb doesn't come down. So,
well, JSOC's got a headquarters right down there in Florida, right? I mean, they could probably just swim across.
Oh, yeah.
So,
tell Greta Thunberg that P. Diddy will send the oil over. Okay, he'll send the baby.
Different kind of oil, Sean.
So what do you think? What do you think with all of this going on, Sean, is the most important thing with Trump's legacy, right? So we're in his second presidency. Mm-hmm. He did quite a bit in his first presidency, right? So he was one of the first presidents in my lifetime that actually at least tried to do everything he said he was going to do, right? Mm-hmm. Most of them come and say, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and then never get it done, and they blame Congress and they point fingers. And he actually got a lot of stuff done. But now that we're in Trump 2.0, what do you think is his legacy?
So you can point to a lot of things. You could point to the border. You could point to the different reforms. But I think something that's overlooked is his judicial appointments and appointments to the judiciary and changes to the judiciary, right? Presidents are temporary. Judges are generational, right? I mean, he's appointed 3 Supreme Court justices who are all fairly young. I promise you, if they are in danger of losing the Senate, I'm almost certain that Alito will step down before they lose the Senate. And before Trump's 4 years are up, both Thomas and Alito will step down. So Trump, if they keep the Senate, so Trump can appoint 2 more Supreme Court justices. So now he will have appointed 5 of the 9 Supreme Court justices who will be on that court for generations, and then hundreds of federal judges, and he's appointing all of them in I'm 49, so in my age group, right? So they're going to be there decades, right? They're going to be there a long time, and that's going to have a long-term impact on constitutional interpretation, limits on federal power that lasts decades. And that's going to be a I won't say permanent stopgap, but a generational stopgap on extreme leftism.
Yeah. Well, we've seen some of his previous assignments, his previous choices haven't always worked out that well.
It's true.
Right. So Amy Coney Barrett has been
Neil Gorsuch,
Gorsuch has been a little bit of a disappointment. Now, I personally don't think we're going to keep the Senate, right? I think Republicans are going to lose the Senate. I think the Republicans are going to lose the House. So I don't think he's going to get any more appointments because they will play the same game that was played last time, where it doesn't matter. They will keep the seat open until after the election, and that's the excuse. So
I think Alito steps down.
Well, he may step down. They'll just keep the seat open. They'll keep the seat warm. And what that's going to open up is the importance of the next presidential election, right? And so to my next question, Tyler, who's the successor? Who's going to take over after Trump steps down?
I think I don't have a certain person in mind, but I think it's whoever can disrupt and continue the more so of how Trump ran in 2016 in his first presidency. I think if someone can be a sort of popularist, more middle ground Republican that can speak to more people like he did when he first ran, that's going to be the person who can figure that out and can be that exact person. I think is going to be the best candidate to be his predecessor. I don't know who that exactly is going to be right now. I don't see anyone right now on my radar that's like, this is obvious to me. But I think if someone can do that and they can show a track record of doing what they said that they were going to do on all their campaigns, that they followed through the things that they've claimed that they were going to do when they got into the position that they were going to be, that I think is going to be the person that will put themselves head and shoulders above everyone else and be able to continue pushing the country in a better direction.
Well, historically, that's been the vice president, right? So in this case, it would be Vance. But I think the Secretary of State is probably a more important position than that of the vice president. The Secretary of State does so much more. And in this case, Rubio, we've all seen the memes. That guy's wearing 100 hats, man. That guy's doing everything from, I saw one today where they were complaining about The Rock in the live action form of Moana, and they had Rubio dressed up with the tattoos. I have to send that to you guys. It's hilarious. So I think Vance is probably the number one because that's typically how history has done it. And I think Rubio, me personally, I would like to see Rubio as secretary or as the vice president, and then be the presidential nominee after that. That's who I would see. But what do you think, Pat, on how much Trump has changed the Republican Party? Because we're only about 4 years apart, and so we've seen a couple of Republican
I just
presidents.
turned 50. I just turned 50 myself.
Yeah.
So, when we go back to, we talk about who's next in line real quick. I'm real adamant about not sharing that because I was one of the early people that said Pence was a badass dude when he first in Trump's first term, and that guy turned out to be a freaking idiot. I looked at DeSantis and what's the one-eyed patch jackass from Texas, dude? That
Dan Crenshaw.
I thought DeSantis and Crenshaw could have been a great ticket. My God, was I wrong? So right now, I do like JD Vance. He's also a Marine, so there's a little bias there, but he's a well-spoken individual. He goes on MSNBC, he goes on CNN, and he eats these people for lunch. On top of that, you mentioned Marco Rubio, same kind of guy. He's got such a great vocabulary and sense of what's going on in geopolitics in the world that those two guys are obviously who I see going. But when it comes to what Trump's done in his presidency and now in his second term, is he's driven the liberal party to the right. The old school liberals have now come, like Bill Maher. No one would ever guess that Bill Maher, of all people, would fucking talk the way he does. He doesn't kiss Trump's ass, but he calls out the bullshit he sees on the left. Joe Rogan, a social conservative now, but was also a big liberal in California for a long time, dude, till he moved to Texas and got red pilled and understood, like, what the fuck is going on? And COVID caused that. That was liberal policies and shit. That they've done so much crazy shit in the last 5 to 8 years that they've pushed the whole party to the center. And now people on the right are now seeing things the same as the guys that are center that were liberals for many years, dude. So he's taken the message from the Democrats. His message is the working people, take care of working class. That's the reason they lost the first time with Obama, was that Trump came in and took the message of the working class. That was a Democratic thing for years.
Yeah.
And then he took their message from them and they had nowhere to go. They're fucking homeless. And they got Hillary Clinton just blabbing her fucking mouth. So I think what he did was he stole their message and left them homeless, dude. And that's where they are right now. He's also swinging for the fences now because he doesn't have to worry about re-election. He didn't give a shit. He's going to do what he really wants to and plow through what his agenda is. And yeah, I think you're right. There's a great possibility they could lose the House and the Senate. I think Clarence Thomas for sure is on the verge of retiring. Yeah. I think they need to make that happen ASAP. Clarence Thomas is smart enough to step down before. And who was the Alito? Alito, yeah. Alito. But who was during Obama's presidency? Was it Ruth Bader Ginsburg that could have retired and didn't? And then Trump appointed a person in her place. You learn from the past. You don't let that happen to you. You watched it happen to Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Well, what's the other one, Kagan, or the other one that has some health issues, right?
It's Kagan,
has some health issues. So she may end up stepping down anyway. Yeah. But to your point on Vance being, well spoken, he's also learned from Trump and has become a bit of a troll master himself.
He's Trump light, dude. He's Trump light with blood in his veins. He's young,
and that's one of the things that they've definitely done is not only taken those more moderate leftists and moved them closer to the center, closer to the right, but he's pushed the far left as they can get. You can't get them any further than that.
All these 80-20 issues they keep talking about. You keep hearing these 80-20 issues, and they're on the wrong side of 80-20 issues. Common sense people don't look at the 20 side of that and agree with it mostly. They're more towards the 80 side, like women competing against men in sports. That doesn't make any sense to anybody, and they're jumping on that 20%. It doesn't matter. Right now, voter ID, we talked about it earlier. That's an 80-20 issue. They're on the wrong side. I'd leave Chuck Schumer where he's at. Let him keep opening it. Leave Jeffries where he's at. These two idiots are not the greatest spokespeople for the Democratic Party right now.
Right. Yeah. So what do you think, Los, on his presidency and his legacy? I mean, do you think anything he's done is going to hurt that legacy?
No, the legacy, I'm glad you asked, because I want to go back to that piece of it. And I know everybody just recently has this whole, he lost, with the Supreme Court on tariffs. But I'm telling you right now, up until the 70s, that was the number one revenue for the United States was tariffs. Mm-hmm. Now we've completely got away from that. Trump started that in his first presidency with the 301 tariffs, 25% on China. Then you had a Democrat president come in and go, oh, wait a minute, man, I like this. I'm not getting rid of all this money, man. I like this revenue coming in. He may have lost the IEPA challenge. That's just a little battle within the big war. What he's done is he's now established a process moving forward, because now they have the 121 allows them a gap period time to get the investigations they need to go put stuff into your 232s, your 301s. And now what they're doing is they're categorizing everything from all of these different industries. Now, moving forward, you just start throwing different industries into this area and you start charging more and more tariffs, and it causes more revenue, but it also brings things to the table to talk. So, and him being the big deal maker and all that kind of stuff, and revenue gains and all of those pieces, I think that's going to be one of his biggest legacies, is that he actually brought the U.S. back to a structure of where you can bring in more revenue based off of the changes and the increase and growth of technology and and the economy.
Well, I mean, if tariffs are so bad, why do other countries put them on American goods? Right.
Exactly.
I mean, if tariffs are so horrible, why do they keep tariffing our shit? So I think tariffs should be 100% reciprocal. If you're going to put a tariff on our stuff, we're going to put the same tariff on your stuff.
I mean, you can't be $40 trillion in debt and be the piggy bank for the world, dude. It just can't happen.
No.
You just can't keep this up. It's not sustainable, man.
No. And my one of the things I always say is no amount of taxation can cure the disease of government spending. So it doesn't matter how much money we get in. If the government doesn't stop spending our shit, we're always going to be $35 trillion in debt. We're always going to have way more money going out than we are coming in. So that's an unfortunate thing. So let's start wrapping this up. We've been going about an hour, man. It goes by quick. So we'll start with you, Tyler. Let's any last words you want to give us? What do you want to leave us with?
Put me on the spot there. Yeah, I think the biggest thing for complacency. We can't be complacent as American citizens. That is going to be the biggest thing, whether if it's in business or if it's in politics or anything like that. Our complacency is going to kill us in the end. I mean, I learned that as a private in the Army, and it's something I think is more people need to learn that and understand that. The more proactive we are towards capabilities and the world itself. And as we've seen, the more proactive we've been with politics, we see the shift and the change that's happening, right? As we're calling things out and people are understanding this is an 80-20 issue. 80% of the people, this is, you see what's happening where boys and men are getting pulled out of women's sports, right? Because of it, right? The more proactive we are, the less complacent we are and just sitting back and letting things happen because we don't want to ruffle anybody's feathers.
Sure.
The further we're going to get, not only as a society, but as a country. We're going to continue to evolve and to continue to stay best country in the world.
Yeah. That part of that complacency is our security as well, right? And so as we get engaged in places like Iran, as Cuba is going to come up, there's a lot of people within our borders already. We saw with the open borders under Biden how many people that they let in, and many of those people that they let in don't like us very well. Right. So, so as far as the complacency, you got to stay on your toes. Got to make sure that, your head's on a swivel, and, keep an eye on your neighbors, keep an eye on the person to your left and the person to your right, and hug the people you love. So absolutely. All right, Sean, what you got?
So I think we've gotten to a place in our society where people care more about winning arguments than solving problems, and that's dangerous, right? Because most Americans, I feel, actually agree on the outcomes: safe communities, a stable economy, fair opportunity, right? Where we break down is trust. We don't trust the systems and we don't trust each other's intent. So instead of fixing what's broken, we just simply default to picking sides and defending those sides. If we can just shift back to focusing on outcomes, not tribes, and start fixing systems instead of fighting each other, a lot of this tension in the country starts to come down pretty quickly.
We saw Charlie Kirk possibly killed for that very reason, right?
Right.
I mean, all he wanted to do was have the conversation, continue moving it forward,
right.
And what do? They turn around and kill him.
That's right.
So that's an unfortunate thing.
Yeah.
What do you got, Los?
Common sense regulation. You've got to have an understanding of what you're up against when you're going to regulate certain things when it comes to people, economy, and the global market. It all ties into, we've talked about oil, we've talked about different aspects of the things that are going on in conflicts around the globe. When we regulate things and we don't do it properly, it causes more issues at home and to our economy and to our people and to our businesses, and then we struggle to get past it. So we're going to have to be a little bit brighter, a little bit more cautious on what we're regulating and how we're doing it, to make sure that it is our best interest that's in place.
Well, in order to do that, we've got to have common sense in Washington, right? So that means we have to vote smarter, right? And hopefully by reducing reducing the population to the voting population to only those who truly want to vote. Like I said earlier in the conversation, about those who are willing to put forth the minimal of effort to go get the IDs required to vote. Hopefully we can start voting smarter instead of sending people to Washington like the guy out of Georgia that thought an island was going to tip over. Right. We need to stop sending that guy. He's been in there since I think the 80s. We need to quit sending that guy. We need to quit sending Maxine Waters to Washington. We need to get people like Mitch McConnell, who is a walking corpse, out of office. We need to put, you had mentioned years ago to me the idea of enforcing term limits from the state level. And I think that's something that we can all push for at our own state levels, right? Start pushing your local politicians to say, hey, let's put this on the ballot that if you're going to go represent Texas, you can only do so twice, right? Or 3 times. So I think we've got to get smarter in Washington. We didn't get $39 trillion in debt because the people in Washington are smart. I wouldn't trust probably 99% of them to run a free lemonade stand. So, all right, Pat, what you got?
I'd say messaging is what we got to pay attention to, dude. And our key on immigration, when they talk about the amount of criminals that have committed crimes here in the United States is such a small fraction. I worked immigration for 4 years. I did 2 years as a flight mech. We flew illegal immigrants to Central and South America. I was the mechanic to make sure the plane got back and didn't get stuck in El Salvador. These people are convicted or they've committed crimes in their country. So saying they've committed no crimes, that's a word they're using here, or a phrase they're using because it hasn't happened here. These are still criminals in their own country. We had an 80-year-old man get on one of our planes in a wheelchair. You're thinking, oh, this poor old man. He murdered 3 people and buried them under the concrete slab that he got a loan from to build a warehouse. He killed them and buried them underneath the slab. So these people are committing murder and crimes in their own country and fleeing to us. So when the Democrats say, oh, a small percentage of these people are convicted felons or committed crimes in the United States, yeah, that you need to pay attention to that because that's messaging that they're using. They're not telling you all the shit that they've done in their own country.
Right.
One other small thing is the messaging on Iran right now. We keep talking about nuclear and their army. How about they killed 30 to 40,000 of their own people in the streets for protesting? That should be what the message should be. You want to get a liberal bleeding heart on your side? Bring up the 30, 40,000 people, the young 19-year-old wrestler that just got hung in Iran. Yeah. That's the messaging we need to be speaking. Trump is really the only one talking about the people murdered in their country. Everybody else keeps talking about nuclear bombs and uranium and all that. That's what we need to talk about. That's the messaging in this world, in this country right now that we need to pay attention to.
So the ICE detainers is one that's always, it just baffles me because of the way I see it. So one of the things that they've always said was, okay, if you get arrested and you're in our jail and there's an ICE detainer, certain places are not going to give you over to ICE. Well, let's think about that for a second. You don't get arrested for littering. You don't get arrested for jaywalking. You get arrested when the crime is serious enough to remove you from population and put you in prison. That alone should say if you're here illegally, you should be exported because obviously you couldn't follow the laws and the rules that we have, that we had to arrest you and take you off the street. How that's a controversial topic, I have no fucking clue. Because we didn't just say, hey, we're not going to arrest you. We're going to leave you on the street, but there's an ICE detainer. Come pick him up. No, what you did was violent or criminal enough. We had to remove you from the population.
Let me make one other point about the immigration
too. Over?
So 2 years into Trump's last term, or his first term, 2018, when we used to deport to Mexico with our aircraft, we'd fly 135 each plane. We had 12 aircraft that we would fly Central and South America every day, Monday through Friday, sometimes Monday through Sunday. When we flew into Mexico, we would fly originally into Mexico City. We would let the 135 out. Mexican police would take them and disperse them to where they belong. Okay, you committed this crime in this part of Mexico.
Right.
They would ship them out. 2018, Mexico said, no, you're not bringing them into Mexico City anymore. So what did we do? We dumped trash, rapists, murderers, drug dealers on our southern border. Well, what do you think that did to our southern border towns? These
Sure.
people are overrun, basically just free cartel members. They're right there on your southern border, right across the street from where we're at. We were dumping thousands every week on the southern border because we weren't allowed to bring them back into Mexico. Trump fought and allowed us to where we got to bring them back into Mexico City. But that's the kind of bullshit that you don't see, you don't hear on the news. You have to be involved in it to understand what's going on. One other thing, Guatemala. We agreed to build them a huge prison facility in Guatemala. As soon as it was built, Guatemala said, nope, we're not taking them. You know who flew on a plane to Guatemala and made it happen? One of the people? Nancy fucking Pelosi. Yeah, she didn't do that on the news, but I saw it fucking happen. She flew to Guatemala with other diplomats, whatever, and told them, you're going to take these people back. So the kind of bullshit you see on the news is what Dad used to say, kabuki fucking theater, dude. This is bullshit you're watching on the news. Pay attention because that's not reality.
All right. Well, we've been going a little over an hour, and I appreciate everybody coming on, giving us a little bit of your time. Make sure you visit all of our sponsors: Marvita, Alpha Elite Performance, Bowhammer.com, Grill Your Ass Off, Gear for Grunts. We have a code for Grill Your Ass Off, so you can get some get a percentage off when you order. So make sure you use that. And I appreciate everybody joining us, man. Appreciate it. Thank you. Y'all have a good evening.
Thanks, man. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.